Hello, world. How are you today? It's around 8:20 a.m. in the morning here on a Thursday, and I was just looking through some comments on my recent YouTube videos, and there was this one comment that I felt deserved a voice response. Um, I'm sure there are people who can relate to this. It's quite an intense comment, and I know that for some people it might be hard to hear, but it's a reality that people are physically abused at some point when they're either younger or they've been in a romantic relationship with somebody. That does happen. When I was working at the domestic violence shelter, I met women who had grown up in families where their parents were loving, where they didn't have any problems at home with their parents, but somehow they ended up in a relationship with somebody. And it's good to know that because what we tend to believe is that it's always the result. Like people only get into physically abusive relationships in adulthood because they were basically groomed to do so in their childhood. And that's not always the case. The reason why we all tend to think that is because there is a lot of evidence that suggests that that is a big reason why people end up in abusive romantic relationships. But, it's important that I share that because I think it's good to know that just because if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, you might be trying to figure out why, and you think back to your family life growing up, and you think, I don't understand. My parents were great. What happened? And you're not the only one. Don't feel bad or weird about that or confused. Who knows? Who knows? These these people, uh these I'll say aggressive, controlling, domineering personality types. There are people like in this category who they simply seek out very sensitive people. Like what I was saying in one of my recent episodes on the empath, and people who fall into this category of an empath or perhaps a highly sensitive person, perhaps people who can feel the energy of others can be taken advantage of. And sometimes that has absolutely nothing to do with your upbringing. But anyway, I want to address the question that somebody asked me. And I won't read the exact comment, but the question had something to do with an experience this person had with being choked by a boyfriend over 2 decades ago and wanting to know if there was any way to release the trauma. And I thought, wow, I can't offer anything really by way of a YouTube comment on such a serious experience. What I did suggest was I find working with a body worker to be extremely helpful when it comes to somatic memories, meaning body memories. So, what I mean by that is so the way post-traumatic stress disorder works, which by the way, I don't like that term. If you guys have never seen George Carlin's bit on soft language, I highly recommend you watch it or listen to it after this. And he goes on a full rant about what he dislikes about this term. And I totally agree with him. I do not like this term. I think it's way too clinical. I think it whitewashes the entire experience of what happens to a person who has been through something so horrific that their body cannot forget it. And their body responds to triggers, things in the environment. It can be a scent, it can be a sound, it can be a personality type. All kinds of things can trigger a flashback of some kind. And the flashback can show up by way of the body, meaning the body responds to the trigger as if the old trauma is happening right now. There can also be emotional flashbacks, which could feel kind of like a panic attack in my experience, where something happens that sort of reminds your nervous system of the trauma that happened or the abuse that happened to you a long time ago, and your body responds the way it would have responded back then. And so that might be crying or shaking, or perhaps you go into a full on panic attack because your nervous system doesn't realize in that moment that you're actually safe, that actually nothing, that threat is not there. But your body doesn't know that. The body holds on to a lot of information. I would go so far as to say, and please keep in mind that all of this is my perspective. This is my opinion. This is based on my experiences, my own personal trainings that I've been through, my own work experience, my own interpersonal relationships and experiences within those. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a voice teacher who has a lot of experience and training and education in trauma work, in body work, and in healing and wellness practices. Anyway, sorry for that long disclaimer. I just want to make it very clear that you should never take anything I say as a hard fact, that these are perspectives I hold based on my experiences. So, in my experience, from my perspective, what's happening when you've experienced some kind of physical abuse and when the abuse feels like in the moment when it was happening, well, like you could die. And probably all, well, unless you have built up some kind of resiliency, or perhaps the person doesn't really scare you. And I say that not to be dismissive, because I can tell you, and I think a lot of people who were spanked as children have stories like this. I heard them growing up where people would say, "Oh, when my mom spanks me, please, like they basically roll their eyes at it. It's so not threatening or scary. But when their dad spanks them, holy cow, like they are afraid for their life. So there are varying degrees of severity when it comes to any kind of physical abuse. When I say that, I mean in regards to what it does to you psychologically. So if you had these physically violating experiences that made you feel like your life was being threatened, that is extremely traumatic. And your body is going to remember it, because your body is going to try to make an imprint in order to protect you for the next time it happens. The body is, I believe, it's a reflection of the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is taking notes of everything, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. That's why it's the subconscious mind. So while you may be listening to my voice right now and focusing on the words I'm saying and experiencing your own memories as I bring them up, there are also things happening around you, like colors, and there are aromas, there are sounds happening around you, and your subconscious is taking in all of it. And it's like your subconscious is filing it away. It's it's taking notes because it's there to help you function. And that's part of why getting older can be easier in some ways, because hopefully you're always learning from your experiences. And so your subconscious starts to take notes, where it starts to realize that certain things are not so threatening, not so scary. But when it comes to life-threatening experiences, when you feel when your physical boundaries have been violated and you feel that fear, yeah, that's and you don't have a chance to shake it off. See, the other thing about post-traumatic stress is the way it happens, from what I understand, based on my own research and my own experiences, is that you get violated, and then you can't process the feeling of fear. So when an animal is chased by a predator and the animal escapes and is safe, finds itself in a place of safety, the animal shakes its body. That's what it does. Next time your dog has like a slip or something, or does like falls or something, or does something where it probably hurt him, notice how he shakes afterwards. He's literally shaking off that trauma that just happened. And then he goes on with his life and he's fine. Another way that our bodies release trauma, if after it has to be done after it's happened. The way you release, so like I'll give you another example. I was in Nice once in France, and I was swimming in the Mediterranean, and oh my God, the current was so strong and it was so scary. And I had to get assistance to get out of the water. Thank God I had two strong men next to me in the water, and they had to carry me to the shore because the current was so strong I couldn't do it myself. I I did not know this information at the time, and I was trying to save face. I was trying to look in control. I was trying to look cool. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to break out into sobs, because in my mind I had just barely missed an opportunity to drown. And I was very much aware of this, and I was still feeling the fear, the after effects of that fear. And I held my body stiff. I tightened my face. I could feel that tightening in my throat as I was holding back the tears. What my body wanted to do was shake and cry, but I did not do it. And what followed was a fear of the water that had never been there before. I grew up in Florida. I grew up going to the beach all the time. I had an unusual childhood compared to a lot of people, because most people in the world do not grow up near the water, but I did. I should not be afraid of the water. Since then, I've been able to get a little more comfortable, but that is an example of a traumatic situation that happened. I did not process it, meaning I did not shake, I did not cry, sob. Screaming, shouting, using your voice is another way to release the trauma. I didn't do any of those things. I denied it. I stiffened up my body. I held back the tears, and I pretended to everybody around me that I was fine. And so my body took on a fear response where every time I was around the water, I became terrified and I would not go in the water. So that's a concrete example of how the body reacts when it doesn't process the trauma immediately. And so if your abuse is the or if the thing that happened to your body was abusive, then obviously you were not allowed to process the thing that had happened to you. And so that trauma stays in your body. And so, in terms of things like being hit or any kind of sexual violation or being strangled, which is what this person experienced, or you fill in the blank, whatever happened to you on your body, whatever body part, where, and by the way, this doesn't always have to be abusive. So if you were ever in a car accident or some kind of a fall where you broke a bone, the and the pain was, so bad. And what do they give you? What do they do as soon as you get medical intervention? They give you painkillers, which is the compassionate thing to do, of course, but it it doesn't help your body in long term, because what happens is your body doesn't feel the pain and therefore doesn't process the trauma of it through shaking, sobbing, screaming. It just kind of goes numb. And so you may have a sensitivity to those parts that were broken at one point. If you ever had a surgery, if you ever had a surgery of any kind, even if it was voluntary, there may be sensitivity around the part of your body that was cut because they cut your body, which is a trauma, but you had anesthetic. You were numbed. The medicine they give you during the surgery gives you amnesia. So you consciously forget the violation to your body while being numbed out and therefore not feeling the pain of being cut into your body. But your body remembers it. Your body remembers, and that causes a lot of confusion. Believe me, as someone who had surgeries at a very young age, it took me forever to make this connection, to realize that I had trauma around the parts of my body that had been surgically cut, and I did not realize it. For any of you um, voice workers, who, of course, that's all of you listening, consider any tonsillectomies used to be very trendy. When I was growing up, everybody had their tonsils removed. I mean, not literally everybody, but it seemed like a lot of people did. If you had your tonsils removed at a young age and you struggle with voice, blocks in the voice, there might be some body trauma. There might be some body memories there. If you ever had any kind of surgery on your lungs and, all is working just fine, but you still struggle to take in enough air to sing or speak, yeah, there might be some blocks there, some energy blocks there from a trauma that you forgot about. Because that's essentially what surgery is designed to do. It's designed to traumatize your body and then, but in silence, to the point where you don't feel it happening, and then you forget all about it afterwards. I want to give you a little side note that may shock you. So, warning, trigger warning. When I was making this connection, and I was reflecting on when I worked at the DV shelter, and I spoke with sexual assault victims a lot. I don't know if I'm not supposed to say that word on my channel. I think I apologize in advance. I think I have to start saying things like SA, which I think is so stupid, but it's the world we live in, and I don't want to get blocked. So I'll remember to say that this from now on, moving forward. But anyway, I often worked with women who had been drugged, and that's how they were violated. So they were unconscious, and they didn't remember anything. They just knew they had been violated, and they didn't remember any details. But what they would tell me is that throughout the recovery process, through the aftermath years, they would often wake up, and it was always like waking up. It was always waking up from a dream or something, and they could wake up and they could feel something in their body, like a memory being triggered. It's like they could feel the thing that had happened to them, but they couldn't give you any like details. They just their body was reminding them that yes, in fact, something did happen to you. But that's it. And so as I was trying to like connect the dots between surgery and trauma in the body, and I was thinking about these SA drugs that are given in a dating situation, and the experiences that these women were sharing with me way back then, I decided to look up the drugs that are used in these intimate dating situations, and I wanted to see what their original usages were designed for, because these drugs don't just pop up out of nowhere. Nobody says, I'm going to design a street drug so that I can take advantage of women. No, that doesn't happen. What people do is they find pharmaceutical drugs that already exist and they get creative and they go, oh, that drug could be used for this nefarious purpose. And so, sure enough, I looked up the two popular ones from when I was working in the field were Rohypnol, which is shortened and known on the street as roofies, and GHB. And sure enough, these drugs were used as general anesthesia for surgery at one point. They are no longer, according to my research, they are no longer used for surgery purposes, but they were once upon a time. And that's when I realized, oh, surgery is definitely a violation of the body, even if it was voluntary, even if you were an adult when you chose to do it. But you can imagine being a child in that situation where you don't know what's going on. You feel weird when you wake up from it. You don't have any memories. Like you have no memories of the previous hours or for however long you were out. You have pain in your body that needs drugs to numb, and it's very confusing. Okay, so all of that to say that when the body is physically violated, and especially when there's fear involved, but any violation, really, if it's a violation, it's a violation. The body remembers. And so the commenter wanted to know if I had any suggestions for releasing the trauma. I don't have a single answer for you. I don't really know the answer. But what I can share with you is a couple things that I did to release the physical traumas that were still lingering in my body many years after they occurred. There were two things I did. The first thing I did when I decided to embark on this healing journey, and this was a long time ago, as somebody who used to work as a massage therapist, as somebody who is a body worker, I understood that body workers have this power to release trauma from the body. It's often done inadvertently. When you get a massage, the massage therapist is just doing their thing. But what happens more than you would think, I've been on the table when this happened myself, and I've been the therapist when this happened with a client, where your hands will touch a part of the body, and all of a sudden the client is sobbing. Sometimes, yeah, sobbing is usually what happens. I've never experienced anything worse than that, like no panic or anything, just sobbing. And every time I've witnessed this or experienced it myself, no idea why. No explanation. It's just something was touched where trauma was being stored, and it was released by the movements of the massage therapist. And so, with that knowledge, I thought, what if I purposely go into a bodywork session as a client and explain to my massage therapist, what I'm going through, and make a plan with them to work on an ongoing basis with the intention of releasing the trauma that is stuck in my body. I wonder if that would work. It was a hypothesis, and I thought, let's experiment, let's try this. So I found a massage therapist who I had gone to see a couple times, and I liked him a lot. I trusted him. I trusted his energy. And I chose a man purposely because I had been hurt by a man. And so I thought, my hypothesis, I should say, was if a man's touch is what scared me so much, or a man's energy, I should say. It wasn't even so much touch. It was more like a male energy. If a male energy is what triggers this fear response in my body, then a male energy is going to heal it. And so I found this wonderful, wonderful man who I'm just eternally grateful for. I think about him now and I get emotional because it was, this was during a time when this was before all of this trauma informed speech became public knowledge and became so normalized in the culture. It wasn't like, it was different. Today now people know what trauma informed means. They know what trauma means. They understand that people are more educated on the residual effects of these situations, these things that happen. But back then, when I was embarking on this journey, it was really vulnerable for me to seek him out, explain to him in vague terms, by the way. I did not share every detail. I just said to him what I just said to you. I said, look, a male energy caused my body to become totally on guard and hypervigilant. I'm sick of living like this, and I need your help. I want to work with you. I can't remember how often we met. I can't remember if it was once a month. I want to say it was once a month. I don't think it was any more than that. I didn't feel capable of handling more than that. And so I said, we're going to meet once a month, please. And I need you to help me and I even shared with him that I was struggling to express myself. I was struggling with my creativity and I didn't feel as confident with my voice. And he said yes, and he took it very seriously. He reached out to his colleagues. He asked them for advice on how to help somebody with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he helped me a lot. And I remember it was actually him who suggested to me the practice that became what I call the walk and talk. He was the one who told me to talk to myself. When I shared with him that my voice was stuck and I didn't know what to do about it, he said, talk to yourself. And then he suggested that I watch a film that had come out recently called The King's Speech, which I recommend to you if you've never seen it. It made a big difference in my life. It really inspired me. And then I don't think I really started the talking practice until many, many years later. But I did start at some point talking to myself, and it actually really did help a lot. And that's why I encourage you. The walk and talk is when you take your phone or a recording device and you go outside and you walk and you talk to yourself and you just talk. You just talk about whatever comes up. If you feel weird about it, you talk about that. And then the walking movement, the left, right, rhythmic motion of your body warms up your mind. It relaxes your mind. This left, right action it's scientifically proven. You can look it up. It calms the mind. And so what happens is after you've been doing that for about 10 minutes, you get into it and you start talking. You start really talking, and you can use this as an opportunity to be your own therapist, work through stuff that's bothering you. And you can also use it as an opportunity to practice feeling your own voice because there's no audience to be conscious of. You can just focus on the feeling in your voice. So anyway, body work on a regular basis with somebody you trust, somebody who you can share things with. You don't have to tell them everything. They're not your therapist, and it's not really fair to dump everything on them. That's not what they're trained to do. But it's good if you can find somebody who you can at least share little details with, like the ones that I already told you that I shared with him. Just enough information so that he can or she can help you. So that's the first suggestion I would have. And then I kind of threw in that walk and talk, which is extremely helpful for everybody. The second practice is actually the practice that I now teach in my method, in my voice method, which is a form of sound healing that I developed. It's a combination of I kind of took from my many years of training in classical music. So, with the vocal technique I learned from classical music, combined with a type of, it's not really chanting, but I did practice chanting for many years. So, I experienced the powerful effects of chanting. Amazing. It also combines with a form of sound healing I learned from a sound healer who studied with Jonathan Goldman, a prominent pioneer in the field of modern day sound healing. It's it also I also pull from the research on psychedelic journeys. Um, Personally, I don't take psychedelics. I used to engage with cannabis. And I think that when you take large doses of edible forms, it can sort of stimulate or simulate a sort of psychedelic experience from what I've read. Because I've never actually taken a psychedelic, I don't know for sure, but I have read so many books on the topic of psychedelic research, psychedelics in terms of healing, and I've been fascinated by the topic since I figured out how to put that practice into voice work. I'm no longer interested in psychedelics. I for a while I thought I would try them, but then I was able to develop this sound healing method that worked. It worked for me, and I used it to heal the trauma around my surgeries. So those are the two things I can offer you. And I know that the second thing I mentioned, well, the third thing technically about the sound journeys, I do offer this information in doses on my YouTube channel. There's a video I have called uh, How to Heal or How to Release Trauma with Your Voice, where I give an introduction to how to do that. And you can take that information and run with it. You never have to like do a private session with me or join my community. Like, you don't have to pay me a cent ever to use that information. I offer that for free. You can take that and do your own thing, and it'll help you. And maybe you're like me, someone who is very self-motivated and inventive and can kind of figure it out. Or I am going heavy on this in the voice liberation method because it was pivotal in my own healing practice. If I had not figured out this method of voice work, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I wouldn't. My voice would still be stuck. I would still be terrified of sharing my most vulnerable experiences. I would still be so worried about how I'm going to be perceived. But because I found that voice work, and of course all the other stuff I did before that, now I'm comfortable with myself. I'm okay. I'm okay being me. And the evidence is overwhelming throughout the last few months because people like you have been reaching out to me. And what I'm learning, especially with my one-on-one sessions, is that there are a lot of people like me. I didn't know until I decided to finally step out and start sharing. I had a feeling and I was trusting. I was hoping and trusting that that would happen, that I would be confirmed in my I want to say suspicion, but that's such a weird word to use here. My hypothesis that there are people who have been through similar things, like on a vibration level. I mean, like not literally, but just, similar things on the frequency spectrum of experiences. And also these same people who are drawn to the same types of healing practices, people who haven't really been able to get any help or relief from the Western model, people who don't want to take drugs, like pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, people who already have this intuition. That's another thing I've noticed is that I'm not the only one. The people who have been drawn to work with me, whether it's in the community or one-on-one, they have this intuitive sense. that their bodies hold all the information. That's my personal belief. That's something that I have lived with. That's a belief I've lived with for a long time. And that's why I've chosen to take the paths that I've taken when it comes to healing. And that's how I got to this point where I am now, where now I'm actually able to take everything I've learned and put it into the main part of who I am, which is a voice worker, and now help other people whose voices are stuck because of very similar situations where the energy is stuck in the body. And I say that meaning that's what I mean the same thing as whenever we say trauma stuck in the body. Trauma is that's a good word for it. Um, I would say that energy blockages, when you hear people of an Eastern persuasion or even a New Age persuasion, whatever, when you hear people in the wellness world talking about energy blockages, I translate that in my head to mean trapped trauma, what the body remembers. The body keeps the score. What we learned in massage school about how trauma gets stuck in the body. I would say that's the same thing as when people say blocked energy. And the vocal method I've come up with, which helped me get to this point, acts as a massage therapist in a way, but with your own voice, with your vocal vibrations. And it's my desire and hope that by offering you information on classical vocal technique, you can open up your voice in a way that provides the most healing, because classical vocal technique is what opera singers use. And opera singers they train so hard and for so long. They are athletes of the voice. And what opera singers learn how to do is they become these extremely powerful vessels, these powerful instruments, where their sound is so big and so resonant, it vibrates in their entire body and it resonates from within their body and gets projected out in such a powerful way that they can be heard across an auditorium with no microphone. I mean, just think about that for a moment. If ever anything deserved the word awesome, that's it. And I learned how to do that. I started learning how to do that at a very young age. And I've been teaching it to people for a long time. So I've been living with this information, this vocal technique information, for at least 30 years of my life. And now I'm taking it and I'm merging it with all the information that I've acquired over the years on the topic of healing and trauma. And now I'm sharing it with you. So anyway, if anything, I hope you'll just subscribe and keep learning what you can. If you want to join the discussion, please do so on either YouTube or Substack. That's where I'm checking for comments, and I'd love to hear what you think. I love reading your comments. Obviously, they inspire new videos, which I appreciate, and I think other people do too, because every time I make a video or a podcast inspired by one of your comments, I see so many other comments thanking me for the video. So I thank you for asking these questions and bringing these things up into the discussion, because we're kind of starting a movement here. We've started a whole new way of looking at trauma, because this is not something that exists. Believe me, I spent many years in the recent past looking for tools to help me. I wanted to heal my problems through the voice, and I found people who were helpful. I was really inspired by people like Stuart Pearce. I highly recommend his books. And I think her handle is the Holistic Voice Coach. I think that's her name. Her name is Marge. She's from, I think she's Danish. She lives in Europe. And then there's another Indian singer named Gina Salah. These people had a great influence on me, but none of them were able to package it up in a way that really worked in a very pointed way, because the thing is, everybody has their expertise, and everybody shares what they have based on their own expertise and experience. My expertise happens to be around the voice, coupled with trauma healing and wellness practices and, holistic stuff, which is what I'm trying that's why I'm trying to package it up, because I think it really helps people a lot. So, anyway, I've talked for such a long time. This is the longest episode I've gone. So, thank you for those who have stuck it out to the very end. I appreciate you very much. And look into my uh, my voice liberation method course. If you want to take advantage of the 50% off sale, check out my community. Maybe what you're in search of is having other people around you. We have our second courage circle coming up next week. The first one was super inspiring. You have people in there with. Okay, so it looks like I got cut off. I don't know. I think I was just making my closing statement to you. So I'm making a second recording here just to sign off and say thank you. Thank you for being here. And I encourage you to check out my voice liberation course, check out my community. In the community, we have our second courage circle showing up next week. It's very inspiring. People who are scared to use their voices in front of people. And I don't know what else could be more inspiring than that. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you supporting me. I am honored to be in this role, and I will talk to you all soon.